we're going to come back to composites of functions today. So you see your composition symbol, right? F of g of x, that means f with g inside. But we're going to do it with equations now, not graphs or tables, equations. So before we even start with that, I want to make sure we remember how to use the equations. So find g of 5 using these equations right here. Go ahead on your own paper, find g of 5. Write that down and find it. You're on the back.
It's like, I don't see g of 5.
I know we're not at tables, but compare to someone next to you what you got for g of 5. Okay, come on.
Oh my God.
We have an equation right here. G of x is x minus 3.
Okay.
So if I ask you to find g of 5, what do you do with the 5?
5 minus 3.
You
That's 2.
plug it in for the x, right? Not super this is why this is exactly why we did this, right? Okay, do we remember how to do that, right? With equations? Okay? If this is the g equation and x is 5, then you're plugging the 5 in for x. So this is 5 minus 3, which is equal to 2. Okay, let's try again. Find f of 5. All right, compare what you got for that with someone nearby. I hear a lot of 5s. We got 5s. All right, well, now we're plugging it into this equation for x, right? So the 5 is going to go there. That's now 2 times 5 minus 5. So that's going to be 5 because it'll be 10 minus 5. Okay, so that is what we already know how to do, right? We've already done that, okay? We just needed a refresher. Now we're going to do something a little bit more because we're going to do the composition. So now remember composition, f of g of x means f with g of x inside. Remember that from Monday? Okay, we just don't have tables and graphs now. Okay, so we're going to have to use the equations. On Monday, you would try to find g of x on the graph, right? That's what you would try to do, or find it on the table first, right? That's what we would do. Now, we need to use the equations, but do we even have to find g of x, or do we know what g of x is?
It is. It's 2.
Well, not g of x is not 2. That was g of 5, but this doesn't say g of 5. This says just g of x. But what is g of x? X minus 3. So now we're going to put that inside. So this will be f with x minus 3 inside, because g of x is x minus 3, right? They told us what g of x is already. It's x minus 3. So now this is f with x minus 3 inside. Now remember, how did you find f of 5? What did you do with the 5?
Plugged it in for the x.
You put it in for the x, right? We did problems in the last unit where I made you find f of x plus h. Remember that? Where you had x plus h inside instead of a 5. And we still put it in there for the x, right? So where is this x minus 3 going to have to go? In for the x, right? Anything inside of here is going to go in f where the x is. Just like it was a 5, just like it was a b in there, you would put a b in there for x, right? Whatever is inside is going to go in here for this x, right? So it's going to be 2 times x minus 3, but we need to make sure we show that we're multiplying by that all 2 times all of x minus 3, right? Because you're putting that x minus 3 right here for the x, and then we should have a minus 5. Okay. Yeah. Okay, can I simplify that? What should I start with doing? Distributing or multiplying that 2, right? 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 3, negative 6. Then we have the minus 5. And then that will simplify a little bit more, right? We can combine the negative 6 and the negative 5 to 2x minus 11. So our final answer for the composition here is f of g is equal to 2x minus 11. That's our final answer for the composition. Because when we put g inside of f is the outside function, g we put inside, we ended up with 2x minus 11. Now, the question asks us to do something else too. It says, find each composite and what? What else did it ask us to find? The domain. So now you need to look at your answer, use what we did yesterday, and find the domain of this answer. So write down what you think the domain is. Do we have a denominator?
No.
Do we have a square root?
No.
So what's the domain? All real numbers. No denominator, no square root. The domain will be all real numbers. Now for B, the only difference is f and g are switched now, right? So g will be on the outside. So we'll have g with f of x inside. So we start on the inside. Do we already know what f of x is?
Yes.
Yeah, what did they tell us f of x is?
2x.
2x minus 5. So let's put that in there for f of x. So inside g, you should have 2x minus 5. Because that's what f of x is. We're literally replacing this f of x with what it is, 2x minus 5. And when I asked you to find g of 5, you took that 5 and you put it right here for this x, right? So I'm going to take everything that's inside here, and where is this going to have to go? In place of that x right there, right? Because that's how you find g of something. It doesn't matter what's inside here. That whole thing has to go in that x. So all of this 2x minus 5 is going to go in here for the x inside of g. So it'll be 2x minus 5, and then we'll have a minus 3 on the end. Because we put all of this inside of here for that x.
You don't have to put it in parentheses.
You don't have to, because you're just subtracting 3 from that. You're not multiplying. Or if you were subtracting something else bigger, then yeah. And then we can simplify that, combine our like terms, and we'll have 2x minus 8. So our final answer for this composition, g of f, is 2x minus 8. But they also asked us to find what? The domain. So go ahead and write down what you think the domain of that one is. What's the domain? All real numbers. No denominator, no square roots. Okay. Now this one is very similar to B. There's just one tiny difference. What is the only difference between B and C? There's a 2 right here with this x now, okay? So this process is going to feel a little bit different, but it really starts the exact same way. So we're still going to write down exactly what it means. So g of f of 2 but now we have to look at this f of 2 and ask us, do they already tell us what f of 2 is?
Yes.
Kind of, sort of. Can you tell me, it's a number. F of 2 should be a number. Can you tell me right now what f of 2 is? Do they tell us what f of 2 is? But can we find it pretty easily? Yeah, so they don't say f of 2 is 7, right? But we can find f of 2 pretty easily, right? Up here, it was just f of x. We already knew what f of x was, right? So here we do have to find f of 2. So we're going to first start by finding f of 2. So write down underneath it f of 2 and go ahead and find what f of 2 is. It's not hard to do, right? We can do it, but they didn't give it to us immediately, just to write in there. Wait. Show it to me again. Is it positive one?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
4 minus 5?
No, I'm not, because, yeah.
All right, so if you got -1 for f of 1, then you're on the right track. Raise your hand if you got -1. You got -1? All right, so we plugged 1 in for this equation right here. So we have 2 times, I'm sorry, not 1. We plugged 2 into that equation right there. 2 times 2 minus 5, so that's 4 minus 5, which is -1. So f of 2 is -1. Is that my answer? No, that was just f of 2. So what do I need to put right here now? -1, right? This is -1. So now I need to go back up here and put -1 inside of g, right? Because f of 2 was inside of g. So now that's -1. And do we know how to find -1? F of g of -1. Yeah, go ahead and find it. So you should plug -1 into this equation for x now. So we should have -1 minus 3, which is -4. So that is your final answer, -4. Okay, so that's your final answer for your composition here. So it started with the same process, right? We still started with the inside, but we had to find that number first, right? It wasn't just an equation given to us. Any questions about C? On this one, did it say anything about the domain? Finding the domain right here? No. Why not? Why doesn't that question really make any sense? Let's look at our answer. You guys would probably be confused if I asked you to find the domain of this, right? Because that doesn't really make any sense. It's not a function, right? We don't need to know the domain of that. It's just a number, right? So we're not finding, whereas here, the answer was a function, right? And so we could talk about the domain. All right, let's do one more. D. Rewrite it, what it means, f of g of 2. And you're going to start in the middle. So it's find g of 2 first. Once you find g of 2, plug it in here and find f of that value. All right, go ahead and compare with something nearby. What you got for g of 2, and then what you got for the final answer as well. What you got for g of 2, and what you got for the final answer. What do you mean you don't know how?
Okay.
Did you write it down?
So, yeah. So I had G equals -1.
No, g of 2 equals -1.
Oh.
So where does that need to go? Look at what you have written down. So g of 2, you should have gotten -1. Raise your hand if you got -1 for g of 2. Just the first part. -1? Good. G of 2, we got -1 because we should have 2 minus 3, which is -1. Okay? Now, is that my final answer? No, that's just g of 2, right? We need f of g of 2. So now I have to go back in and say, well, g of 2 was -1, so I need f of -1 because g of 2 was inside the f. So then you have to go plug -1 into your first equation for f. So 2 times -1 minus 5. So that should be -7. So you should have gotten -7 as a final answer on that one. If you did, great. Any questions about D? All right, I'm going to do one more like A and B with you, and then you're going to try a couple on your own. This one is a little bit trickier because it's different types of equations, okay? But all you need to do is just think about what you're doing, right? Don't just do something because it's just, oh, that's what I do, right? Think about what you're doing, okay? So let's first walk through A together. So first, write down what it means. F of g of x. We're back to ones with x's now, okay? This time, do we know what g of x is? Yeah, they already told us, right? We don't need to find that. What is g of x? X minus 3, right there. They said g of x is x minus 3. So now we need to put that inside f. So put x minus 3 in there inside the f where the g was, because g was inside f. And this isn't a number anymore, but this still, what am I still going to do with x minus 3? Where does that need to go? I need to put it in the x, in which one of these three equations? The f equation, right? We're doing the f equation. So you're going to take x minus 3, you're going to put it right here for this x, right? You're going to replace this x right here with x minus 3. So it will be the square root of x minus 3. And there's nothing else we can do to that. We can't simplify that or do anything. So this is the final answer for f of g. Composition f of g. Okay, g was inside of f, so we put g inside f, and then we replaced that x that f had with this x minus 3 that was inside. Okay, now it does ask us to find the domain. So go ahead and do that on your own now. Find the domain of this answer. This right here. Your answer, your composition, find the domain. Look for denominators, look for square roots. This is what we did yesterday. Is there a denominator? No, but there is a what? Square root. So what do I do with that stuff under the square root? Greater than or equal to 0. Greater than or equal to 0 for square roots because it's got to be positive or 0. Add 3 to both sides and you get x is greater than or equal to 3. So that's your answer to that question, the composition and the domain. I want you to try. All right. Make sure we're thinking about what we're doing, right? First, you're going to rewrite what it means. I think a lot of people did really good right here, right? You rewrote what the composition means. Now, start on the inside. Do we know what f of x is? No. Yeah, what is f of x?
X.
The square root of x, right? F of x is the square root of x. So what am I going to replace this with right here? I'm going to rewrite that. This is g. I know what f of x is. It's the square root of x. Right? So I need to put the square root of x right here where f of x is, right? I need to put the square root of x inside g. Now all of a sudden you guys forgot everything that you know how to do. Because where does this need to go?
The X.
It needs to go in for the x, right? Isn't that what I do with the numbers inside of here?
Yeah.
Where do they go? In place for the x. So it needs to go right here, right? So that, I need to put this right there, right? If this was a 5, you would put a 5 right there and do 5 minus 3, right? So now we need to put the square root of x right there and do square root of x minus 3. Some of you put this all the way, but that's not putting this right there, right? You're putting this right there. Just like if there was a 5 right here, right? You have to put that right there. Then you have minus 3. And that is very different from this. This is a totally different answer than this. Okay? These are not the same answer. So this is your answer for g of f, the composition. You can't subtract those, right? So you're done at that point.
What about the square root?
What do you mean?
What's the domain?
The domain? Yeah, we're not done. We haven't done the domain. So now think about your domain if you haven't already written down what the domain is for that. Do I have any denominators? No, but I have a square root, right? But what's under the square root? Just x. So what are you going to do with that x? Greater than or equal to 0, right? That's what you do anytime there's a square root. You take what's under the square root and you make it greater than or equal to 0. Now do you have to solve that inequality? It's already solved for x, right? So it's actually easier than some of the other ones we've done, right? You just took what was under the radical and you set it greater than or equal to 0 like we usually do. Okay, I'm going to give you another chance to try C because I don't think everyone got too far with C. So try C, h of g of x, and think about what you're doing again. Be careful. Think about what you're doing. Make sure you put, if you have something inside of a function, that you put it in for the x. You did not put that in for the x. Nope, you did not put all of that has to go in for the x. How I have h of g of x there. So all of that g of x inside needs to be replaced by this. So you should just have h parentheses x minus 2 parentheses. Does that make sense? You didn't put that in for x. Remember, all of x minus 3 has to go in the spot where x goes. This is not equal to that, but this is correct. All right, let's make sure you're on the right track. So, g of x is what? What is g? X minus 3. So we all did a great job getting to this part, right? You put x minus 3 here. Now, where does this x minus 3 have to go in? Into g?
No, h.
Into h, and where does this need to go? Where does this x minus 3 need to go? In that x right here, right? Oh. All of this has to go in there for that x, right? So all of this has to go in there for this x. And so all of that is squared, right? The whole thing is squared because all of that has to go in there for the x. So how do you show me with math symbols that all of this is squared?
What's a parenthesis?
Parentheses, yeah. So put parentheses in, and then it'll turn into that. Now, this is not x squared minus 9. Be careful. You can't distribute your things, so you have to do. Sometimes you might see the answer just left like this. Some people might leave the answer like this. Okay? But I do want you to practice multiplying it out, because remember, that is x minus 3 times x minus 3, right? And you can multiply that out. So that'll be x squared minus 3x plus 9, which is x squared minus 6x plus 9. So you might see this one as your final answer. If it was like a Schoology or something, like you might see it here, or you might see it all the way done. But don't forget the domain. What's the domain of this? All real numbers. Good. All right, I'm going to basically have you do the next one on your own as well, but I'll get you started just to remind you how it goes. Okay. This one, now we have the number in there. It doesn't really change a whole lot of what we're doing. So rewrite what it means, g of 1. But now, this is not just g of x, right? They told us what g of x is, but we can't just put that in there because now we're asked to find g of 1. And I need to actually find that first, right? They didn't tell me what g of 1 is. So first find g of 1. Then use that to find your answer. 26, when you plug g of 1 into g, 1 squared minus 3 times 1 plus 8 is 6. You can even type that into your calculator if you want to, right? So then, that's just g of 1. G of 1 is 6. So g of 6 is what we have to find next, because we got g of 1 was 6. So we plug that in, we find g of 6. 6 squared minus 3 times 6 plus 8. You could even do that in your calculator, and that's where you should get your 26.
Me too.
Okay? For E, f of g of 7, you need to start by finding g of 7 first. We know how to find g of 7. We're going to plug 7 into our equation for g. And you should have gotten 36. Raise your hand if you got 36 for that first part. Yeah? 36 for plugging 7 into g. Okay? But that's not my answer, right? That's just g of 7. But where does that g of 7 need to go? Right there, inside the f. So that 36 needs to go right here where that g of 7 was. And now we need to find f of 36. Well, how do we do that? We take 36 and we plug it into the f equation. So it'll be the square root of 36. What's the square root of 36? 6. So the final answer here is 6. All right, so with a problem like this, we are now given the answer to the problem. H of x, they say, is f of g of x, right? So f of g of x is equal to h of x, which they say is 2x minus 3 squared. And now we're supposed to find f and g. Now g is the inside function here, so I always say it's easiest to start by finding g. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at your answer, and you're going to see, okay, what looks like the inside, since g is the inside. And if we look at this one and look at what's inside, it's pretty easy to see what you'd think was inside. Well, this is inside the parentheses, so that's what we mean by the inside. 2x minus 3 is inside. This squared is on the outside. So here we would start by saying, okay, 2x minus 3 is on the inside, so that must be g of x. So we're going to say g of x is 2x minus 3, that inside part. And then f is the outside function. So then to find the outside function f of x, what you can do, an easy way to see what that is, you can see the outside function is the squared part. But what you can do is you can replace what you just wrote down here with g with x. So we're undoing that composition process. So if you replace what you just wrote down, g, with x, then you end up with x squared. And so that will be your outside function, f. So here we're giving them the functions and they're giving us the answers. It's kind of the opposite, right? We're undoing that process. And now we could check ourselves pretty easily and see that this is correct, because if we did f of g of x and we took f and we put g of x inside f where the x is, then we would have 2x minus 3 all squared. And that's what we started with, okay? So those are our answers right there. So for this next example, same thing, f of g of x is still equal to h, our answer. And we need to find the g and the h, so we're undoing it. So g is our inside function, so we need to look at what's on the inside to find g. That here is 2x minus 3 again. And then the outside function you see is the square root, but if you want to really see what f is, replace what we just wrote down with an x, and then you have the square root of x, so that tells you that f is going to be the square root of x. And if you were to check yourself and find f of g of x, you would end up right back here. So I'm going to write down the answers here to the you try problem. so that you can try them on your own and see if you get the right answers. So the answer here to this first part is the composition f of g should be 3x plus 10. And the domain of that is all real numbers. For the next one, g of f should be 3x plus 2. And the domain of that is all real numbers. And then when you evaluate A, you should end up with 8, B, you should end up with 16, and C, you should end up with 10.